Welcome to the next episode of the Dragon's Den podcast. Today we have retired battalion chief out of Cobb County, Kevin Lewis. Kevin talks to us about the development and growth of the Cobb County Search Program from its early inception. We talk about its mission, its early struggles, and its success. Kevin also discusses some of the time he spent teaching out at conferences and how the impact of the program has grown far outside the borders of Cobb County. We hope you enjoy the episode. Thank you for listening. Welcome to the next episode of the Dragon's Den podcast. We have a very special guest today. All my guests are special. I wouldn't have them on, but today we got on Kevin Lewis out of Cobb County. The way that this podcast came to be is that Kevin Lewis is one of the forefathers of the search program that Cobb has been running for, say, the last 15 plus years, and he's definitely going to get into that. But I've had on Jimmy Gregory to talk about the current iteration of what that search program looks like and all the good things that they're doing in Cobb. But every time I talk about this, whether it be through Dustin Martinez or through Jimmy Gregory, they always give credit back to the guys that were really at the forefront of getting their culture changed and developed, especially in the search mindset. They always say, it started with a bunch of different guys, but Kevin Lewis was one of them. And I said, well, I want to hear, I know what the current search program looks like, and it was a great podcast with Jimmy, but I want to hear about the early years and culture and kind of what drives that. And so we were able to make it happen. Jimmy put me into touch with Kevin, and I'm honored to sit down and kind of dive into from the start to basically where it's at now, the trials and tribulations and the reasons and all of those things, and have Kevin talk about that. So with no further ado, Kevin, thank you for joining us to the program. And the way that we always start this thing is let's start back at the beginning. What got you into Cobb? What got you into the fire service? And then we'll move down our talking points. Thank you for joining us.
Sure. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for having me on the Dragon's Den. It's a privilege to be here today with you, just speaking a little bit about search and the fire department. Thank you to my friends Jimmy and Dusty for hooking us up. It's been good talking with you and such. So I'm a Long Island kid. I grew up in East Northport, New York, Long Island, and wound up the son of a police officer, of all things, and was surrounded where we lived. My dad worked in Nassau County, and we lived out in Suffolk County. It's major volunteer departments, volley departments everywhere across Long Island. Many of my father's friends were firemen. Their police relief point was at the firehouses, and my father spent a ton of time at work at the firehouses when not running around with doing police stuff. So many of his best friends were firemen, and it was a tight-knit community. And so my family was always going to barbecues and firemen coming and going, and spent a lot of time in the firehouse as a kid and such. So these are really, really impressive men to me, not only my father, but many of his friends, brave and humble individuals that were just really into the job, not only as my father was as a police officer, but what really drew me was the firefighters and how they were. And I saw that brotherhood from a very early point in my life as a kid, and growing up in the 70s and 80s. So that was a big part of it. I just remember the courage and heroism that these guys would exhibit. My father would tell me, hey, they had a fire last night, and Paul was in there, and one of my dad's best friends, and I just saw this in them, and it just I've always gravitated toward that, believe it or not. Every kid says they want to be a fireman, but for me, I really did have that seed planted at a very early age. So many of these individuals, nobody even knows their names, but they were some of the toughest and humble men I've ever come across, including my father. So grew up in Long Island and went to college at the University of Delaware, and I was the first of my family to go to college. It was kind of what my parents wanted me to do. I took the FDNY test in 1992. Still in college at that point. My dad said, "Go ahead and take the test, but you're staying in college." He thought my parents thought that was very important. So finished college at the University of Delaware. Two of my best friends, Charlie and Rusty. Charlie's now a DC fireman, a battalion chief over there, and my friend Jimmy Happy Griswold. He was a volunteer fireman in Maryland for many years. So even in college, I was still plugged into you know the fire service because my friend Charlie's father was a legendary Prince George's County volunteer chief, Nick Finnemore, a legend, and spent a lot of time with him over the years. And so the three of us were kind of the guys that always kind of knew we were going to kind of become firemen once we graduated, and that's kind of what we did. So I graduated and didn't really want to move back home. I was living in a fraternity house with 40 dudes, and the choice was move to Atlanta, Georgia, right before the Olympics, or move back into mom and dad's basement. And so my dad gave me a pretty good nudge because he spent some time at Fort Benning in the Army back in the day. So he said he loved Atlanta and encouraged me to move down. So did my mom, and that's what I did. So I got to Atlanta in January '95 and started testing. So I took the Cobb fire test in '95, and by '96 I was hired, and that's kind of the where that started. So the only two tests I've taken is New York City and Cobb County. So funny thing, after I'd already moved to Georgia, I got the call from New York City in that spring, and it really it kind of broke my heart because I'd already moved, and they passed me by. And my dad said, you made a choice, son. You moved in with your buddies down there, and there ain't no coming back. So I knew I was in the pipeline to get hired in Cobb at that point. So kind of just stuck it out, and I was glad I did for sure.
You're actually the third person that I've had on the podcast, probably multiple, that have said the same thing, that they took the New York test with the hopes of getting in, and they kind of died on the list because there were so many thousands of people down that they had to take a different opportunity. It's amazing how many people that is the number one goal. That's like the prize. Go get on with the New York City Fire Department, and
Sure.
but then they land at a different fire department. I didn't realize how popular that was. I
I,
almost feel like I missed a boat. Like I should have went and applied at New York and then came back down. But all right, so you're in Cobb, you start working, and we kind of have you on for a reasonably specific purpose, which is to talk about the building of eventually what is now the search program of the Cobb Fire Department, which it's built into a very, very nice program. So I want to if you have some back history before the program started, that's fine, but let's fast forward a considerable amount to like when does the brain start stewing on, hey, I think we might be missing something here. Let's kind of get down that path.
sure. I think again, like I had said, I kind of always understood what the mission of the fire department was. I understood the oath I took. I took it serious, and I was never not surrounded by great firemen. To be honest with you, I was just and I saw because I maintained a lot of connection with a lot of my friends up in the Washington D.C. and Prince George area, and many of my father's friends were still working either in the city or in the volunteer departments, and I was still visiting home a lot, spent a lot of time with those guys, and I just kind of paid attention. I was always reading the trade magazines. I was always understanding, how the job was supposed to be done. And as I got a few years on the job, I just realized that we had a deficiency with the way we were doing business on the fire ground in many cases. And nothing I'll say today is a blanket statement, you know, all inclusive and everything. But you'd find pockets where crews would do a great job, and then many other pockets where people really either unknowingly didn't know what to do at all, or were not trained in the proper way. So this kind of jumped out at me, and I just saw something that was deficient, something that we could do better for sure. And you know, I grew up playing football, and one of the things about football is you always look at the film, you always look at what you could do better, and you always critique yourself. You always aspire to do better next week, this week in practice, and then next week at the game, and you analyze that. And people are not offended by criticism. And my dad was a football coach as well too, so um, if you did a lousy job on the football field, your position coach would tell you, "Hey, man, you need to improve in this," and nobody took offense to it. You just worked hard at getting better. So I kind of always had that in me a little bit, and I saw the deficiency not only in myself because I didn't really know what was going on, because I knew a lot of the the training we were getting, and even some of the started going toward a computer-based training system, and it was just it just appeared to me that it was off, and that the deficiency was fairly evident, and kind of just made a conscious decision to try to, in my own way, try to lead us in a direction of improvement as a department for nothing other than the sake of the citizens, and doing a better job honoring the oath.
Okay, so yeah, let's so now you see that there's a deficiency. You said that you're a few years on, so you came on in 95. So we fast forward to the 1998, 1999. So if you're in that zone, which I'll let you kind of recap, what is your first move as probably maybe a young fireman or maybe a young driver operator to say, Cobb is a big ship. This is not a two station department.
Yeah.
So you're a reasonably younger guy in the department. What was your what was your first move?
Well, there was a couple of fires that happened in the department that happened in the first probably 4 to 5 years and me being on the job, and there were fires where there were civilian fatalities. One of them there was 8 civilians that had perished in a trailer fire. Another one we lost another 1 or 2 people. And when you're working, whether you go to the fire or not, you're always listening, and so you can kind of hear what's happening. And we'd go to a fire and we'd wind up. A company, the fifth due company would wind up stumbling over somebody 25, 30 minutes into a fire, and it's like search just really wasn't a priority. We were fire tack centric. We hit it with one line, hit it with the second line, hit it with the third line, get knocked down, and then once that happened, then search and rescue would be assigned. And it was more of an after the fact, you know what I mean? And so those fires, the writing on the wall was there, and the people that were there saw that, hey, you know what, this is we could do better. Just very simply, we're not doing all we can, and how do we get better? So for me, um, and as I promoted through the ranks, I got promoted to engineer in 2001, and as one of my mentors, Johnny C, used to say, because I really wasn't interested in promoting. I love being a fireman. I love riding the back step. I'm riding the back step today, as a matter of fact. I retired and went to work for a fire department as a fireman. This is what I love to do. So um, I never really wanted to get promoted, but John would say, "Hey, man, your area of influence expands, as you travel the ranks. So as an engineer, I was in charge of the rig that day, and so it was my choice in what we did and what we trained on, and so you kind of have an opportunity to influence some people in a way. Then the door opens to help out in training, up with the training academy. So I started doing that a little bit, and that's kind of the genesis of the way things started. But the one of the main things was we had a fire in a townhouse. It was actually on a different shift, but the members had attempted to do a VES, and they were injured. They were injured because of not they weren't training properly. We weren't training in VES. I knew about VES early in my days, and the specific crew I was at, we knew what we were going to do if we caught that fire, but it wasn't a regimented training that it was disseminated through the department. Um, and so this company did a VES, and they made some critical mistakes. They opened a door that they shouldn't have opened, and they created they were sitting in the chimney, and they had too many people in the room, and they all tried to jump out the window at the same time, and they couldn't get out quick enough, and members were injured, thankfully not gravely, but they were hurt, and our department's response to that was basically, like many departments, the easiest thing to do is just say, hey, well, don't do that ever again, and so my department had said, we're not endorsing that tactic, and they called it too dangerous. It was, and I've heard that before in my travels. VES is just too dangerous. VES is way too aggressive, and it's a last resort type of tactic, and I knew that was off, and so that was really that generated the spark in me to really dig in to see how to do this properly. And the fact that my department had said, you're not to do this, that inspires that inspires people sometimes, especially firemen, that, when somebody says don't do that, they kind of want to find a way to do that, especially if they know that it's the industry standard. Vent enter search is a viable tactic. It's the industry standard. And here's my department saying we really don't want you doing that. And that just didn't sit well. So I knew there was a way to try to navigate that water, and I was up to the challenge. And luckily, I had some great mentors back then that kind of helped us along the way. But that's kind of how it started and why it started.
All right. So you have this incident. You have this incident where you have this rough spot on this VES. The department kind of blanket says we're not doing this, but you know that it is a safe thing to do if done properly and trained on and whatnot. So what's
Absolutely.
your next move towards seeing if we can make this better?
Well, yeah, and that was, again, it wasn't just me involved. These conversations happened in the firehouse. We had a great firehouse at the time, um, where I was at, and we just knew this wasn't cutting the mustard. Search wasn't a priority. It was an afterthought. And as I said before, we just kind of lost focus on the mission a little bit. And this, I got to mention, this is around the time when two in, two out back in the 2000s was coming out. The big standard, two in, two out, and for the fire service, it just is basically if you didn't have two out, you couldn't go, and that became like a default excuse not to go in and put out fires, and it was to me and many others, appalling. And they missed the second part of the statement where you can't go in without two out unless there's a potential for rescue. And the way we used to say was, hey, we're going on a house fire. We don't know who's got a car or not. So we made that was our mo, which was, hey, we're going, and we're not going to use the excuse to stand outside. And I think many in the fire service that really weren't cut out for the job anyway found an excuse to stand outside, and that was what two in, two out, uh, to us, didn't hold us back one bit. But for many others at that time in the fire service, not many, but not all, as I said before, not all fell victim to this, but for those not really into the job or wanting to put themselves, and uphold the oath, it became an excuse to stand outside. And it was just the default action became inaction on the fire ground, and civilians were suffering. And it just wasn't cutting the mustard. So, um, for me, as I said before, I was always in the trade magazines. I started going to more conferences. Had some good mentors that would travel around with me. One of the ones we went to for a couple of years was up in Charlotte, North Carolina. Had some great instructors doing some multi-company evolutions, truck company courses. We had Firehouse on the road come down to Atlanta in 2001 after 9/11. Put on a great class. Some of the truck greats were there teaching us truck operations, search and vent, forcible entry and such. And so just really kind of saw how everyone was doing the job, and in these conversations that would happen, it was a lot of times on a break or whatever. How do you guys do this? How do you guys do that? And it just wasn't the big departments either. It wasn't, we were talking to departments that were, you know, ranging from rural departments, because that's always interested me how small units um, do these tactics, because the civilians still expect the fire truck to solve the problem, whether you got six guys on it or two. So we kind of expanded the gamut, and Cobb County is a diverse response area, everything from high rise to some rural areas out west and everything in between. So we really had to look at how other people were doing it, and just look and listen and see what did you have success with, how did you do with this, and then we started just sitting down, and uh, I decided to I need to get in the world of PowerPoint, so I created a VES PowerPoint. The most rudimentary, non-tech savvy person in the world sat down and did a VES PowerPoint. I still have the thing, um, and just tried to spell out some of the information that I didn't invent. I invented none of it. Some of the information that I gathered through Skippy Coleman's book, and through the countless articles I read in fire engineering and Firehouse Magazine, and some of the other books I read, the Fire Officer Handbook of Tactics, written by John Norman, which I used to, I still return back and read that for fun. So spoke to a lot of people along the way. Some of my dad's football coaches. My dad was a football coach, as I said. The whole coaching staff was cops and firemen, many of them from the New York City Fire Department. So I used to go up there every summer to camp, and we'd sit around the fire and have a few beers. And I was talking to some of the greats, Dickie McGuire, God rest his soul, Fred Gallagher Sr., who's a Rescue 2 legend back in the 60s and 70s, Freddie Gallagher Jr. All these guys are great firemen, and we used to sit around the fire and talk. And amidst a bunch of other people, it just really piqued my interest, and I really had the desire to implement something, or try to implement something where I worked, so that we didn't have to turn our backs on the citizens. And that's kind of what got things started. You
S-
know,
So let's
with that first power.
that first PowerPoint. So let's continue flowing down that path. You start up the first PowerPoint. Does it go to the entire department? Are you teaching this just to rookies? Where does that, that circle of influence, where does it start? And then talk about the evolution. Talk about, okay, now it goes from that
Sure,
to now we're maybe it's a 1 hour PowerPoint. Oh man, can we get some hands on this? Oh, now we need maybe
sure.
a full day or 2 days, or start to evolve that.
Sure. So the first PowerPoint, as I mentioned just before, I created that in probably 2005 or six range, maybe seven. I think I was a lieutenant at the time, or just getting ready to make lieutenant. And the funniest thing, some of the old sage guys used to tell me, some of the best ideas are left on the kitchen table for somebody else to bring forward. So and what they meant was sometimes some of the best ideas are passed on to a person of higher rank, so they could push the ball down the field a little bit further, rather than the guy from New York that's here now in Cobb County trying to do things the New York way, or the cowboy way, or the renegade way, or the rogue way. All these things I've heard. Um, no department wants to hear, "Hey, I'm rolling in here with the way New York City does things." And to be honest with you, I understand that. So uh, it was funny. We used to just, we used to print an article out and just set it on the table, sit it on the kitchen table, and somebody read it, and they'd be like, "Oh, wow, this is pretty interesting." So after I made the first PowerPoint, I actually gave the entire PowerPoint to a training lieutenant, and he said, "Can I teach this?" And I said, "Sure, man." It was, so he really didn't do a heck of a lot of work on it at all, but he happened to be assigned in training. So he was a lieutenant, and he took my PowerPoint and basically taught it. And people were like, "Hey, you made it. Why aren't you doing it?" I was like, "Listen, I don't care who gets the credit here. I just want this to be put out there by somebody that has a little more influence than I do at the time." I was a rising lieutenant. This guy had been on 15 years as a lieutenant in training, and he was looking at having a VES in service for the department, and he did that. And the first VES PowerPoint went to him, and he's the one that taught it. And I'm not sure if he even mentioned my name when he taught it, but it was fine with me. So going back to the old rule, sometimes the best ideas are passed on to somebody else that can get the word out maybe a little bit better than you can. So that's how that whole thing started, really, really and truly.
So he picks it up. Now the whole department is doing a little bit of VES training. They're coming in on in service. You got, I mean, well, you retired from there, but several hundred. There's, probably at the time, what, 500 guys back in that year. So now at some point, I guess we can fast forward to let's build a rookie school, or maybe the rookies need to know about the things that the department is kind of already learning. So I'm assuming that's the next step, that continue down the path.
Well, before that point, we had some pretty good promotions where we got some like-minded people, which is one of the most underrated things you could ever have, is a like-minded training chief that goes to the training division, because they want to see things that they know. are going to best serve the citizen. And so they're going to be the ones that are not um, adverse to a new tactic, or hearing or listening to somebody coming in with a little bit of some, a little bit of spin on something that a better way to do business. So we got a really good training chief. His name is Willie Tanks. You know, great guy, and he was all ears. He was all ears. He wanted to hear it, and we got him talked into doing a truck academy. And we did a truck academy on the weekend, on a Saturday and Sunday. It was a voluntary course. We assembled a group of guys that were in the game, and we did a 2-day search, forcible entry, ground ladders, and ventilation course. It was a 16-hour course, hands-on, and for many, it was a truck operations class for a department that really didn't do a whole heck of a lot of truck operations. And to bring 40 people in there and now expose 40 people to it, they're like, whoa, this is great. It turns out that firemen, like good, realistic, and useful training. Believe it or not, good firemen love good training. And that's just the fact. That's universal, really, especially when it's super realistic and they can use it. And it's great. So we created 40 more disciples there, and then we got the training chief to allow us, because we were becoming pretty good at it. A lot of the guys would gravitate toward, each guy had his own niche. You'd have this guy would gravitate toward forcible entry because he was a wizard with tools, and this guy would gravitate toward ventilation because he was a champ with a saw, or this guy would gravitate toward ground ladders because he could fling them around and throw them like nobody's business. For me, I dabbled in each, but for me, the number one thing was search, and so I stuck with that, and we convinced Chief Tanks to allow us to do an in-service for the entire department. We had spring drill and fall drill. We would bring companies down, usually 2 to 4 at a time, twice a day, and we'd give them a class on the 4 pillars of truck operations, each separately. You give them a 2-hour block on vent, 2-hour block on forcible entry, or 2-hour block on. So before long, the entire department was getting this training, and you still heard the moans and groans from some people that would come down and, what's wrong with the way we do it? And honestly, some of the techniques we kind of figured out worked best for us. Once you showed it to them, it was not only you're basically working smart, and smarter, not harder. And it turns out firemen like to work smarter, not harder. And it kind of took off in that fashion. Pretty much at the same time, around the same time, with this great training chief. He created groups. We call them SMEs, subject matter experts. And I never liked the term because I never consider myself an expert at all in anything, to be honest with you. But these groups of people would be, rather than the training staff just being the jack of all, teaching everything, each of these specific groups, whether it be fire attack or firefighter safety or firefighter rescue or ventilation, forcible entry, ground ladders, search, each of these search cadres, these SMEs, as I said, would come in and be the instructors for the recruits. And so we were kind of hitting that at at multiple levels, not only in rookie school, but also in the field. And those two worlds just met in the middle. And it came with it came with some lumps because some people didn't want to hear it. Some people were from the old guard and really, thought we were doing, why do we need this stuff? We do pretty good ourselves. Yeah, nobody's saying that, but, we have to continue to work to get better. And, a lot of these folks knew some of the deficiency that we had, but we're just, it's sometimes it's hard to change, and firemen are sometimes stubborn, and, I'd say we got most on board. There's always a few outliers that they call it. What do they call it? The 10 percenters or the 20 percenters that are just not going to hear you no matter what you say. So we got we had a share of resistance for sure.
It sounds like so you
Hey,
got you had
Jesse.
the yeah, you sounds like you had resistance, which we'll kind of tap on a little bit, but it sounds like the thing that made it go continuously was the support from the training staff. It seems like without that, everything potentially would have collapsed. It sounds like if you that at least that's the basic dichotomy that I'm hearing. If you would have resistance from both, this thing probably doesn't get off the ground at all. But because you had a plugged in training chief, he was allowing some of these things to float in and develop. And then, you had the line, some on the line that were resistant, but they couldn't really stop it because they couldn't really stop it because you had the training side saying, no, we know what he's talking about. We know we see the vision and we're going to allow the vision to go through. And then you start to slowly, I don't know how this plays out. I'd like you to tell me, but slowly you start to win.
Sure.
Actually, I do know how it plays out because Jimmy told me, but slowly you start to win over some guys, right? Slowly you start to win over some guys. And then the guys that you're never going to win over, they're just going to have to retire out and then they don't exist anymore. And then the,
Sure.
the shift starts to happen. So yeah, you can continue on
Sure.
adversity, fighting through it, pitfalls. How do you navigate the pit? How do you navigate that? Go ahead.
Sure. Sure. You know, at that time, the SMEs, the subject matter experts, as I said, were all of us were working in company in the stations, and we'd come in off duty and teach the recruits or whatever. But at the same time, while we were on duty, we were doing a tremendous amount of battalion training. We would and kind of the back when it first started, we were doing classes for our battalion, and then it spread. Hey, I heard Engine 9 and Engine 19 got a good class. Can we send you get a call from a chief. Hey, can we send a unit over to see what you guys are doing over there? And we'd say absolutely. So then we'd say, hey, chief, why don't you come out and see what we're doing? So you had a little bit of further buy-in from people, even prior to going to some of the in services, and you had some people that were really good at it, and we were able to identify some talent and bring them on board and see how they did in front of people, doing a little bit of instruction. um, and some people they were natural at it. They jumped in the game head first, and you know, uh, they really have many of them blossomed into some of the not only the greatest firemen I know, but some of the toughest firemen I know, but some of the greatest instructors and influential people in our department. One of them being Tommy Hancock. I've mentioned his name before to you in previous conversation. Tom was just man, such a visionary. Him and Willie were hand in hand, and I call Willie the godfather of MAFC, the Metro Atlanta Firefighters Conference, which was started, I think, in, I want to tell you, it was 2010, 11 or so. Uh, but I call Tom, the father of MAFC. And, they did things that we didn't think were possible. And Tom was right there through thick and thin the whole time with it. Tom wound up going to training also. But yeah, some of the, you, you know, the adversity we faced, you had, some of our members had gotten us in trouble. There were some questions the way they were treating a recruit or whatever. It was all considered unfounded for the most part, but they were told to suspended from teaching. And you know uh, you know after Willie Tanks had left the training division, that was our guy. Things started changing a little bit, and it wasn't necessarily as wasn't as good. Uh, and I don't know if that's the best word to use, but we weren't getting necessarily the support that we were getting when Chief Tanks was in there, and there are a multitude of reasons. But at one point, they tried to kind of disband the SMEs from teaching recruit school, and we just had to selectively approach that. And I didn't always approach it the right way. I definitely did some look back and say, hey, could I have done this a little bit better? Could I have done that a little bit better? Um, and the answer is yes. But the adversity was handled usually by kind of just sitting down and explaining the why of what we were doing. And it's when you're arguing common sense with a higher ranking officer, and you throw it out there, sir, do you think we're we shut down the SME program, is our recruit school going to get better or worse? And you're going to be the person with your name on that. You're the one that shut it down. Is that really, we've created this, we've climbed this mountain here. Now we're just going to choose to jump off the side of it and have to reclimb it again. Like, we're providing a better product to our citizens. How do you argue against that? And the truth was, there really is no argument once you spell it out like that. And so, at one point they were looking at doing away with live fire, the live fire portion of the hands-on search for recruits. And it's like, whoa, really? So when we send these guys out to the field next month, they're going to be looking to search into a building they've never been in live fire conditions before. Is that something you really want to do? There's not only that, I believe there's liability associated with that. You get a guy, that's having to call a mayday because he's doing a search, and they find out he's never done a search in any type of smoke condition or any type of realistic condition. I tell you, that's a big deal. And so sometimes when you sit across from somebody like that of a higher rank, they go, ooh, maybe you're right. Maybe we need to navigate this in a different way. So I started quickly finding out that the best approach was sometimes just explaining it, and the common sense approach. And we were preaching common sense here in all of this. And it was backed by the mission statement. I mean, literally, the pillar of what we were trying to talk about is backed by our mission statement. It's like, how do you argue against that? It's really, really difficult for some of these folks to do that. And in most cases, we were able to get to be able to continue what we were doing, and not without losing an instructor because he, pushed the guy too hard or tried to encourage somebody in some way that somebody didn't like, and this and that and the other. And the deal was, hey, and we would have instructor meetings, and we would tell guys, hey, just be respectful to the people. We're not here to yell at people or berate people, but we want to be firm, and we want to, hold the truth of what we're talking about here and what we're instructing to the letter, because it's important. And a couple of guys got asked to step aside, and it was next man up, really.
We didn't talk about this previously, but I'm bringing it up right now. Do you think that Georgia smoke diving has been a thing, and that's located right next door to you guys? Do you think
Sure.
that had to would have helped the culture of search and doing hard things and search under the live fire? I mean, did Cobb kind of have a tradition of having, say, a handful of smoke divers, 10, 15 guys that were kind of really buying into the system? Once again, we didn't previously discuss this, but it comes to my head where it's like, wait, that
Good.
culture, probably the smoke diving culture, if y'all were attached to it or close to it, probably helped your mission, if anything, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I got to say, great organization. I was not a smoke diver. I'm not that tough of a guy, but you
Me
talk to
neither. Me
Jimmy
neither.
and
You're fine.
Dusty and some of the tough guys. The toughest guys I know, Mikey Pickett and Bobby Harkins and all these guys, and too many more to mention. But yeah, when you those guys are younger than me, and so when you'd show these guys, and these guys had all been through smoke diver, it was just like they were all about it. It was challenging. It was common sense, and these guys did gravitate to it like nobody's business. I think at one point we had, I don't know, on the search cadre, we like 75% of the guys had been through smoke diver,
Good
and
Lord have mercy.
those that and it really, yeah, it was and for most of the guys that went through smoke diver, it was a humbling experience, and that was one of the pillars of our search cadre is straight out humility. We're not going to boast. We're not going to tell everybody we go to the most fires of anybody. We're not going to tell anybody we're better than anybody. We're going to tell you we were terrible, and we just clawed our way out of that to what we are today, which is much, much better. That's all. We're just much better today than we were back then, and we're proud of that. But humility has been a foundational pillar of what we talk about. And many of those guys, when they come out of smoke diver, you get the non-humble ones sometimes, but most of the ones that gravitated toward the individuals that were looking to do what we were doing in our cadres were very humble individuals.
Yeah,
Um,
I want to I
they
want
really
to
were for so.
I want to support you in that. To say that the one, especially in Cobb, I've only talked to two in Cobb, and of course it was Jimmy who I had on the podcast, and Dustin who I originally reached out to when I heard him on the weekly scrap say, "Hey, if you want this stuff," right? He said very plainly, he goes, "I didn't develop any of this stuff." He goes, "I'm a good plagiarizer," but he took the program, he built it on top of what was already there, changed, edit, built, made it better, and then he takes it and he passes it on to the next guy. But I wanted to support you in saying those guys are extremely humble, and obviously they're absolute dogs of just just being able to do a lot of difficult tasks and whatnot. But anyway, I just wanted to support you in that. Yes, very humble, very good people. But I'm glad that y'all had that culture of smoke diving, doing hard things, victim first mentality, because it does help push forward your mission, and it makes the buy into your search cadre, the SME, so much easier because they already have the like. Man, pulling a Georgia smoke diver in is so it's almost too easy, right? It's like, I already know where your head's
Yeah,
at. Like it's like cheating. It's like, yeah, come on in, guys. We already know
yeah,
that you're where you need to be mentally to slide into the process that we're trying here in Georgia. So we didn't like I said, we didn't talk about that previously, but it just dawned on me like,
yeah,
wait, you have a big pile of people that are already bought into the mission. So it anyway, I want to
no doubt about it.
I'm gonna try to refocus it back. I squirrel brained right there for a second. So you
I'm
have the
glad you did.
yeah, you have the SMEs. You're kind of starting the process. It gets a little bit rocky with the newer chief, but not crazy. We continue on with the process. I kind of want to. I say I want to back up a little bit. Like how I kind of want to talk about the growth a little bit in the sense
Sure.
of when you start this SME. Like how long did you have with that? Like with when you started teaching search to the recruits, it was what was it a 1 day, and then it ended with like three people. It was it did it how did it start, and then how quickly did it grow, and how did you recruit people in generically? I don't need like a we don't need a day by day breakdown, but how did that work?
Yeah, I think I remember teaching. I started teaching recruit school, and I believe is in 2000. I started helping out with search, and I think there was two of us that were doing it. Me and a guy named Hank Hopkins, God rest his soul. But we were two of the guys that were doing it with some moderate support from the training staff that was kind of there. Um, Once we got the okay to go ahead and do the recruit school, it had already morphed a little bit. I don't think search was maybe 2 or 3 days, and then we fought for an extra day. I think it became 4 days, and then at one point it was five, and we called it Search Week. And we typically, I think at that point we kind of got them talked into letting us do 4 days because we still had to teach the NPQ one, the basics, the book basics of search, NPQ 1 and 2, and they still had to be checked off at the end of the academy and tested the NPQ 1 and 2. So you wanted to give them that book basic, but you also wanted to go above and beyond. Our department has never just try to provide the minimum standard. That's when things changed. When I went through the academy, it was a minimum standard. You got NPQ 1 and 2, did a right hand search. You select whatever you want to do, left hand, right hand. They never explained that, why you might want to go left or right. Just get in there and do it. Hand on the wall, searching the wall for the window. That's the best place to find a victim. We know is on the window wall. Your buddy would clamp down your tendon on the outside foot, and you crawl around there and you drag him around the building. It was just brutal. It was brutal. Um, and so that they were just teaching the book basics, and they allowed us to expand a little bit. And it wasn't like it's not revolutionary stuff. We're not teaching people how to launch a rocket here. Basically, what we're doing is we're teaching you to look below the smoke, see if you can get a live fire layout, see if you have any visibility. We actually went away from pitch black, which is all I ever searched buildings in. They used to just black us out all the time, which is a great confidence builder, but that's not always the way fires are. There are pockets where you can see sometimes, and there are sometimes you can't see. and hopefully the ventilation crew is working so you can see a little bit, or you know, improve the conditions. But so we started changing, a little bit how we train people. And we used to let them crawl around without being blacked out. We encourage them to get below the smoke and go back to the basics. We called it the advanced basics. And there's nothing advanced about the basics. Play on words we came up with, and so
Did Cobb, I want to pause you right there.
that's kind of the way.
You talked about the book, grabbing the boot. We know that that is common throughout the entire United States. That's common throughout the fire service, and it's something that as these conferences continue on within the last roughly 15 years, it's hard to know exactly, but that there has been a shift away from that. Especially that we talk about it on podcasts all the time. It's talked about in Fire Engineering Magazine and articles and conferences. Every conference you go to a search class at an outside training. They are not telling you to grab the boot of the guy in front of you and sweep for the window. It's what I was taught because
Yeah,
that was the book standard, but there is no conference anywhere at any search class that is teaching that. Hopefully that can go the way of the dinosaur and sooner rather than later, but it is going the way of the dinosaur. Um, did you ever get any kickback for like searching without a hose line? Was that something that was considered like, whoa, what are you doing? You no hose line? Did y'all get kickback in Cobb for that too?
yeah, there was a little resistance to that, and again, there are people that argued you needed to do VES with a hose line, and what happens if the room flashes, and you need to be able to protect the crew outside, and you got to search behind the hose line, and it was just I think that was the culture a little bit. To be tied to the umbilical cord of the hose line, which means you have to search behind the hose line, which is not always where you're going to find everybody. So we started teaching. Look for alternative methods, alternative means of ingress to get in there, and look to where the fire is. Where's the fire at? Where's the fire going? People are going to flee from the fire away from that area, and many times that's toward the back door. Many times that's not toward the front door, which is where the hose line is typically going. So um, but yeah, there was some resistance with the hose line stuff, but it was just, we did the time tests. We pulled the stopwatch out. Hey, show me how you can search this room with a hose line quicker than I can without a hose line. And if you ever did that test, there's just no comparison. So you're either, if you got the hose line, you should be searching for fire. It's very people with a hose line because your hands have to be on the hose. The guy behind you is humping the hose with his hands. So your hands need to be on the ground looking for people in zero base. And they're just not able to do that effectively with a hose line. You may call it search, but you're just basically wandering around on the hose line. And we did that, and we weren't having great success with it. And so there was a little bit of resistance, but once we kind of got past the point where, hey, fire attack is important. It's one of the pillars of the fire ground, as we say, as Shawnee Gray and I say, left and right. The pillars of the fire ground are search and fire attack. No particular order. So does the fire need to be attacked? Yes. Does search need to be accounted for and done at the same time simultaneously as best you can? Yes. So once we kind of got that point across, people started saying, hey, if we have a line in place, we can search without a hose line. And people were not, you had a few resistant folks in there, but for the most part, everyone kind of took it on board. And if it was one battalion chief that was resistant to that, you had a whole battalion of people that weren't. And it's like, what do you do there? Tell people, on the fire ground, you're only to do, you get into a sticky situation there. So we
Yeah.
kind of convinced the man that what we were preaching was common sense, and it was just people like common sense. You know what I mean? So that was kind of what we did to kind of climb that hurdle a little bit.
So you started out with the two people, just you and one other guy. You start out with a few days, and just to give you some scale and perspective, when I had Jimmy on, I said, "What is y'all's cadre up to now?" And he said, there's probably about 50 or 60 of us." That is huge. That is unbelievably large. Did you feel like, and now I know, let's dive a little bit deeper. I love that Cobb does this. We talk about guys that, they won't retire, the guys that they hang on for too long. And you guys put into place a system inside of your the recruit search week where you cannot hang on to it for too long. You have a 5-year cap that says, "Hey, you can't just lord over this thing like a king. You need to pass this along, and it's going to be somebody else's turn to develop it and take it over." Was that a very intentional thought, or did it kind of just did you stumble across that? Because I really like it, but go ahead.
Um, yes, that was intentional. Everything we tried to do here, we did, as intentional as we could be, to do our deliveries and our documentation in case something came up. We were pretty intentional about it. And I knew right off the bat that, that I was going to be looking for somebody, the next man up, and that's, I was never intimidated by somebody else's success. I want the guys that I'm mentoring below me to be better than me. I'm not worried about them beating me to the next promotion. And sadly, in many cases, in not only in the fire department but just in life, it's like this is our organization. We want it to be the best as it possibly can. And so, why would I look to stifle somebody's talent below me? I want to lift them up above me. And so, I always had that mentality. And you know, and the succession plan was in place, relatively quickly. And you saw some of these guys that were um, really good in front of a crowd. They knew how to instruct. They were respectful. They knew what they were talking about. They were articulate. A lot of these guys are smoke divers, so they've seen professional instruction at a level, that many haven't. Many of these guys were going to conferences. They were seeing other instructors, and yeah, it was intentional, and it was known that this guy's the next man up. We're gonna, I'm gonna pass the reins over to this guy. He's gonna shadow during the classroom portions, and then we're gonna get him to run the clipboard, and then he's gonna run the class with me kind of over his shoulder, and then you let him fly. And to be honest with you, from when the first couple of years that I was in charge of it, what it's morphed into, it's like these guys are doing things that I never thought of. And I'm like, back then I thought that we had all the bases covered, as much as I thought. And I was even, I was never immune to input from anybody. It was always like, hey, if you got a better idea, let's talk about it. Let's do it. In fact, most of the time the answer is yes, let's do that. But once the reins got turned over, to the next guy, he made it better, and then it went to the next guy, he made it better, and the next guy, now Jimmy's up now, and he's made it better. And you know, the one thing all these guys were really good at is not making the same mistakes that the previous guy made. And we make no bones about it. Hey, listen, when we're doing this day here, this is a pitfall. Excuse me, stay out of this area here. Be careful with this. This is where you're going to get jammed up. This is where you're going to get somebody hurt. This is what the students are going to say on this morning here. We had it literally down to a science for the most part. And, the people that stepped in, it was just, they were eager to do it. They had their own ideas, and it was, the program didn't suffer at all. It got better, and it's just so great to see how it's morphed, just even today with Jimmy at the realm. And I think they've already got the next guy picked out. And when I was told that 2 days ago, I was delighted to hear this guy's voice. I've worked around him for years. He's going to be great, and he'll probably implement some things that maybe Jimmy didn't think about. So it's been really cool to see that go down. For sure.
So yeah, the same thing for us. What's so cool about Cobb is that you guys have been at this for 15 years. Or once again, I don't know the exact number, but it's ballpark, give or take 15. And y'all have done all these pitfalls, right? Y'all have gone through these problems, these hang up points, and y'all are moving past and making it better. And once again, you guys, and I say for me, Dustin and Jimmy, are so free to just hand this stuff over and go like, here, go make change in your area. Like we're not hoarding anything. Like here, go improve the world that you live in, which I think is so cool because I can take Dusty's program, and originally I was given 8 hours, so I had 4 hours of PowerPoint of learning the why, and then 4 hours of drills. And I went to Dusty and I said, "Hey man, if you only had 4 hours of drills, what would you do?" And he goes, here's how I break it down. Boom, boom, boom. And like, what a resource to be able to go to a guy that has been running the program to say, if you're only given this amount of time, here's what I think are the most critical deals. And then, hey, now we got 16 hours. Okay, let's look back. What is Cobb
Mhm.
doing? Okay, now we've got 8 more hours. What are the most critical things we can add in? And as we get more time, we can add in things, to your point, that the previous class didn't see, like the previous recruit class. Let's say the first couple never saw searching off of a hose line. So it's a search class, but they go in with a hose line. Now they encounter a victim. What is the plan? What is the plan? What are we doing? Well, the two or three first 2 3 classes didn't get that because we didn't have time. We just didn't have time to implement. But
Right.
now we can keep taking these pieces that y'all have already developed and say, we can just like plug and play. And we're going to have our own hiccups. We're going to have our own problems that we need to sort through, whether it be logistical or manpower, whatever our issues are. But we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And that's why I'm so thankful to Cobb, because it's such a big lift. It's a heavy, difficult lift to develop these programs and implement them. And y'all are like, hey, you don't have to reinvent it. And I've tried very hard. And anybody that's heard me on this podcast or otherwise, I do the same thing. What I've developed off of the back of Cobb, what I have built and plugged and played and added my own stuff. If you want it, text me. I will give it to you. Go make it better in your department and go implement, because here's what I want you to talk on this. This is not a guess, and this is not speculation. The tactics that you guys are teaching in Cobb and the things that I've taught here have directly led to lives being saved that I don't think would have been saved if they had not learned some of the things that they had learned. We are preparing men and women to search and get rescues, and once again, that has had a direct impact on the life of the victim, because people have called me and said, it was because of what you taught that I was able to pull these guys out. And I know that you have had similar experiences, and that's why I want to give this stuff away to say, I want somebody in, I don't know, the middle of, Dennis Riley says Two Potato, Idaho. No disrespect to Idaho, but somebody in Two Potato, Idaho that their life is going to continue. They're going to get another wedding. They're going to get another child. They're going to see a graduation because of something that we delivered to them that they then delivered to their orbit. And boom, a life is saved. Super important to me, ultra important to me. I want you to speak on that.
I couldn't say much more. You just said it's the impact has been felt. There's no doubt about it. It's we've given it away, and again we keep saying Cobb's doing this, Cobb's doing that, and so you might build what you have off the back of Cobb and the way we did it. Um, it's been built off the backs of dozens upon dozens, if not more, of great firemen from many departments around the country, and we've just kind of looked to amplify their success and plugged it into our staffing model and how we do business and what we're going to get. So the only thing that's unique to Cobb is that we were able to plug many of these tactics, whether it be oriented search, whether it be VES, whether it would be searching beyond the door after VES, or any number of these things, we were able to just analyze our need and then tailor that to these existing tactics that many have pioneered years and years and years before we have. And the difference with us was we knew we had a deficiency and we got better. And we did it in a way that I know for a fact it's helped a lot of our citizens. There's been I don't even know, I can't even tell you how many civilians have been saved over the last 15 years since we kind of took this ball and ran with it a little bit. But throughout the impact that we've had teaching at FDIC and Firehouse and some of the other conferences around the Southeast and all over the place for that matter, the impact has definitely been felt, and it's a generational impact. When you're able to grab a kid out and they're able to grow up and have their kids and those kids have kids, and like it really is long lasting. And oh, by the way, for real firemen out there, it feels good to do your job and have the reward of knowing somebody's walking around today because of something that you chose to do, you chose to invest, and you chose to take the oath and do the job, and you did it. So congratulations. You know what I mean?
No doubt. I want to tap on two things right there, and they're separate things, but just to put them out in there is going to be. I'm assuming that you've had six people that have called you or texted you or reached out to you to say something similar. Because when it happens in my department, I usually reach out to Jimmy or Dustin and I reiterate, "Hey man, something happened over here. This good thing. Thank you for." And of course, Dustin, once again, the humility I didn't do. Dustin said, "It ain't me, it's you." And of course, I think he's nonsense because it was him in the
Yeah.
sense that without him, I don't get the information. I can't, it's a back and forth thing, but he's always super humble about it. So I'm assuming that you've gotten those calls or
That's right.
texts too. And then secondly, kind of sort of unrelated is that you not only were teaching within your orbit of Cobb, but you decide like you're bouncing out and you're teaching at all these different conferences. Um let's talk about let's talk about teaching first, and then you can kind of drift into potentially like the impact the messages that keep coming back to you. But what what prompted you to get outside of your department and teach? Was that organic? Was there a mission where you're like, "Hey, I want to go teach somewhere else"? Because like I said, like you said, you've taught at FDIC. That's not an accident. Like, how did that happen?
Well, as I said, as a younger fireman, one of my great mentors, Johnny Caniff, one of the greats, a legend in Cobb County. You know, we went around to a couple of conferences. One of them, the ones that sticks out of my mind is we were in Charlotte. I think it was probably 2003 or so. I think I mentioned it before. And I just saw the level of camaraderie between the instructional group that was there that day, and just their depth of knowledge on stuff was just monumental. And him and I looked at each other that after one afternoon, and it was you know we looked at each other and said, "Man, wouldn't it be great to be able to so good at something that somebody wanted you to come and speak on, and or teach on it?" And it was like, yeah, and I kind of I kind of made a decision at that point, like, hey, I'd like to give that a shot if I could. And lo and behold, I've started writing a few articles. I've been writing for a while, but started submitting a few articles to some of the magazines. Firehouse was one of the first ones to publish me. Um, in 2014, I believe, and then I got tacked on to go to teach a class there for Firehouse in Baltimore, and then it kind of snowballed from there, um, and just got bigger and bigger. And what we were doing with at the same time, Shawnee Gray's whole attack from the Burnsides coming out, so um, people were up in arms about wimpy firemen standing on the street squirting water, and he was getting a lot of blowback on that, and he making his connections, and we made a connection with some guys out in LA County, and we decided to kind of partner with them, and we've given I think one of the best hands-on classes for sure. That not only Firehouse World, Firehouse Expo, and FDIC the same year, back I think in 2019 or 2020. It was all hands on. It's all live fire, and LA County brings their depth of knowledge in fire attack, and we combine and brought our depth of knowledge and what we've been able to do at Cobb, and brought those two things together at these conferences. And it's the class is still going strong. It's happening again this year. I hope you're able to hit it when you go up there. At least make a stop by and visit. But it's no doubt many great classes at FDIC. This one is certainly among the best of them, combining the pillars of the fireman, which is search and fire attack. And we've really done a good job with how we deliver it. It's a professional group of guys, and we've been exposed to a whole nother group of professionals out in LA County who are just some of the most dynamic and knowledgeable instructors that I've ever encountered in my life. I mean, these guys are just insanely talented individuals, the best of the best, really.
No doubt. The one of talking about the any kind of feedback that you get, if you have a story on that, I think that would be good. But like somebody reaching back out to you and saying, "Hey, I appreciate the thing that you taught me because it led to." If you have that, you can definitely give it. If not, you can
Sure.
bypass it. There was something previous that we talked about where it's the recent rookie that had made the grab. We talked about it on Jimmy Gregory's podcast. So if you want to go back and listen to that,
Yeah.
you can hear it directly from him. But I'm going to let you speak to either one of those.
Yeah. You know, I was always kind of weird about when somebody would come to a class of mine, and I gave a VES class, or really just a hands-on approach, a very practical approach to doing VES, whether you're an experienced department that does it all the time, or somebody that's hasn't ever heard about it. So and back in kind of back in 14 and 15 and 16, you used to ask people, hey, how many people, have heard of VES, and how many, you'd see a couple hands, and how many people have actually done it, how many people really think they understand it. And happily today, I don't think you could get in front of a group of firemen and ask, if they can explain to you VES. Most of them probably hit it right out of the park, but back then it was a little bit spotty, and we were experiencing in Cobb the same thing. So I knew that others were probably experiencing that, but um, I would always try to create a sign-in sheet, and I would always say, hey, just put your town and department. And I used to transfer that list in every class I did to a master sheet, which I still have. And I used to try to gather the towns and the fire departments in some of the bigger classes we did at FDIC and Firehouse and such. And I had a master sheet, and we've, at this point, we've encountered people in all 50 states. I think 8 countries, including like China, uh, I know Sweden and Mexico and all these different places where people have come out internationally, mainly coming to FDIC. But there's been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of departments that have been exposed to, you know, um, Padre and what we're talking about here with regard to search. But yeah, it's fairly frequent that I'll get a reach back, or one of the members of our cadre group, whether it be Dusty or Jimmy, will get a reach back from somebody saying, "Hey, I wanted to tell you about a fire we had last week. Hey, you told me, when you have heavy fire on the A side, that you can't ignore the C side. That's where you're going to find the people." And that came directly from one of our fires where we got tunneled in on so much heavy body of fire on the A side, nobody went around back. And unfortunately, that's where we found 8 people back there sitting at the back door, overcome by smoke. So that's a poignant example of why, yes, we have to acknowledge the fire, but you have to also acknowledge at the same time where people are going. So you get a reach back on somebody says, "Hey, Kev, you know, you know, one of your guys told me you got to make sure you hit that back door if you can. Just have a quick look back there to see if anyone's hanging at the back door. Whether you search or not, it's a different story, but at least force it and have a quick look. And by the way, I forced the door and there's a person laying right there. It was the easiest grab I ever made." I'm like, wow, that's awesome, dude. Good for you. Thanks for listening. That's all. Thank you, man. You guys have taught me this, and it's like, dude, you did the job, man. That's awesome. So that happens very frequently, and it just with those that have listened to Jimmy's podcast, that heard about the rookie that came out. I had already retired by then, but geez, I got the call that afternoon. Like, a dude that just came out of recruit school like 2 weeks ago is the guy that finds somebody, and he says, and he just, like a champ, is like, "Hey, it's nothing I did. It's what I was taught to do in recruit school." It's like, okay, buddy, that's some serious humility from a really young fireman. That's just so nice to see, and that's just great. Just warms my heart, because these people are that guy for his life. He did the job. It's great. And to just see the return on investment, which is like, oh wow, somebody's walking around today in Cobb County that, for all intents and purposes, wouldn't be there. And it's just great to see that, to be honest with you. And it happens. It's been happening on my list. I can't even keep track of it since I retired. But these guys have continued to impact hundreds of departments, and more, engage more and more people across the country. It's just been awesome.
It I think that's important to tell those stories. I know that you're also humble. I know that. We had trouble. Like, if you try to look up how many podcasts you've done, it's not many because you don't. Um, because you don't come on very often. So it was difficult getting you on. But my point is, it's important to say stuff like that because when you try to develop these programs, as you talked about earlier, there will be kickback. There will be problems that come in, and it's going to feel very frustrating. Like, why even go through it? Why not just be a driver in Cobb, do your truck checks, and why go through the extra effort? Why take the beating? Why take the ridicule? You can get in that negative mindset. So once again, I think it's important to say those things because, man, for me, when things like that happen, or when you get that feedback, it kind of washes away those feelings of, and you go, oh,
Okay.
this is why the whole effort is worth. This is why I continue to struggle and fight with not fight with, but I take you take these beatings or you take these roadblocks and you go, Nope, I know why, and here's why." And it is a very important mission that mission continues to get fulfilled, and it's not a fake mission, it's not like a mission that I hope happens, it's a mission that absolutely happens, especially when you get that feedback. So, I'd like that it was important for me that you talk about those particular things. Um,
For sure. And I'll mention real quick, hate to cut you off again. I think, you know, the boys 2 weeks ago made another one. Squad 7 out there in somewhere out in their area. They showed up and made very quick work and pulled the lady out and gave her a chance. The last I heard, I think she survived. It was heavy fire conditions. They said it was quite hairy. And these guys went, found a side door, made entry without a hose line. Of course, they were, they weren't being too aggressive. They were being safe, and they were accounting for the victim. And they gave this woman a chance. They pulled her out. They did CPR, and this woman went to the hospital with a pulse. And the last I heard, I think she was doing okay as of last week. And this just continues to happen over and over and over again. These guys are, it helped too. And I think like 3 or 4 of the dudes that made the grab are on the search cadre. Many of them smoke divers, just champs, just going in there, just getting the job done. These people are just so lucky to have this group there, because they know what to do. They did the job, and they'll be heading to the Capitol probably to get a medal, but that means nothing to them. They just know that they were happy to be there and give somebody a chance. I always say, you got to give somebody a chance. All you got to do is give them a chance. We can't as firemen, and I heard this a lot earlier in my career. Well, they were already dead. You'd find somebody in a fire and they were probably already dead before we got there. And I'd be like, no, actually, we don't know that. And we just say that to kind of make ourselves feel better because we did a lousy job. So they probably maybe weren't dead. Maybe they were alive. So I would always say, get the person outside, give them a chance, and let the man upstairs talk, sort it out, and give them a chance. And so our job is not to determine that, write people off. Our job is to give somebody a chance. And these guys did that a couple weeks ago, and I just tipped my cap to them. They're just doing a great job. Every day out there, these guys are just doing a job in a great fashion. It's so
it
great to see.
is that the fire that Dusty's holding the command board on the side with a big cheesy grin and not in gear?
I I think I'm not sure. I think that fire may have been the one before that.
Oh, so there
This
was
is
a
this is a this one I'm talking about is pretty recent.
Yeah, they have one where, I think it got included. I'm almost positive it got included in the most recent PowerPoint that we're doing, which was that there was a no everybody was considered out. It was a everybody's out call. Everybody's out of the
Yeah,
house, and then they ended up grabbing him. And Dusty posted it up on Facebook, but he's got the command board, like I said, big cheat, like a proud dad. I don't know if he was IC or not, but
yeah,
he's
yeah.
got a big cheesy grin on it. But if it is a separate incident, then it just goes to show like it's happening often,
Yeah.
all the time. Guys are putting in good, solid search work, and potentially we're pulling people out, and they're living another day, which is literally, like you said, it goes back to the mission. And there's a reason why they put life in the front and not property. Nobody's mission statement says to protect property and life. It says life first for a reason, and they're living out that mission. So it's very cool.
Yeah, great.
We talked quite a bit about adversity and kind of the hangups that you had kind of had and some of the struggle, but I think it's also important to highlight when you start to get buy-in and the guys that really support the mission and you start to get the ball rolling a little bit and you start to really build momentum. You mentioned to me offline about how you were starting to get a little bit of departmental buy-in, not just buy-in from the training side. So I want you to kind of talk about that real quick.
Yeah, for sure. Buy-ins, you got to have that. And again, when you're focusing on the mission and your oath, the oath that we all took, the buy-in is would appear to be, fairly self-evident, but, we started getting some really good support and we actually had some command staff members that were in our office that were very supportive of our search cadre as we traveled around a little bit, started uh, you know, you'd have to request time off, training time off, and I don't know if anyone was ever denied. We all got the time to go and to teach and further the word of doing our searches how we were doing it, how we learned and improved, and our command, including Chief Kreider, great guy. His motto but always he'd say, why not? Why would I say no? You guys get out there and do what you do. And the results were paying dividends because when turns out when your firemen are saving people in your community, that the fire chief gets the kudos. He's happy to hear that, and he most certainly was, and he was excited for us to get out there, and we did just that. And so he was very supportive. We had an operations chief at the time that was really supportive of what we were doing. And I would just say, for those that are may not have the support of the command, just sometimes the indirect approach is the best way. It's not always a head-on approach always works with command staff, and you just have to show the results, and the results will show themselves with the impact you have in your community. And you have to be humble in the way you present the fact that, hey, chief, that grab last week, that was resulted from the training we did 6 months ago with that in service we did with the department. And you have to be forthright about that and bring that forward so people understand why this happened. So we were always very grateful to our the people that supported us as a search cadre. And I would just encourage anybody that create that relationship early on. Our fire chief is a guy I played football with 20 something years prior. He was a quarterback, I was a guard, and we were like this. And so he trusted me, I trusted him, and the best way to have success with trying to implement programs like this is create relationships where people understand what you're trying to do, that you're serious about the mission, that you're trying to uphold the oath. And to be honest with you, when you use these, when we talk about search and you're using, talking about the VES tactic or searching opposite the line or the oriented method, whatever method you're using, you know, training in these methods, you're going to naturally become you're going to become safer on the fire ground. Not only are you going to have a better impact for your civilians, but you're also going to become safer in the way you operate. And we do VES all the time now. I mean, I say all the time, but we use VES when we need to. We don't use it when we don't need to. And we most of the time, thank God, knock on wood, we haven't had anybody injured. And we were told years ago that it's the last resort tactic, very dangerous, too aggressive, don't do it. And it turns out that if you do it properly and you understand what you're doing, it actually could be a more effective way and a safer way to do search than not. So, um, your command staff is important to get that buy-in and do it early and often, and create those positive relationships rather than an adversary in front of you. That can create a problem for you.
Excellent. I'm glad you mentioned that. So the next thing that we want to move into as we start to kind of tie this thing up is we're going to move into the last two questions that I ask most of the guests. I have not been perfect about asking everybody, but I try to catch most of them. And the first one that I want to ask you is mentor or mentors in your career. And you've mentioned a lot of names on this podcast, and I love people that mention names, because the reason is that I know some of them already passed away. I've heard you mention that, but if they just so happen to click on this episode and listen, there's certain people that they may have impacted you, and you may have never told them that. And now they'll get to listen back and say, "Man, I didn't know that I meant that much to Kevin or whatever. So I like when people mention names. So I give this opportunity to say, in your career, were there people that you think had a vested interest in your success, as whether it be a firefighter or an officer or an instructor, that they kept you in line, they rooted you on and cheered for you, they gave you the advice, they picked up the phone and listened to you, maybe it was moan and complain for 2 hours about some situation. Here's the spot. Here's the spot where I say, who were your guys?
Oh, wow. I hate to say too many to list, but yeah, there is way too many to list, and I give myself a slight pat on the back because I always tried to pay attention to what guys did well, and I'd also pay attention to what guys, some of my bosses, what they did poorly, and I said to myself, I don't want to do that. That didn't work too well, so I always try to pay attention to that, and so. One of the first ones I encountered was a guy by the name of Johnny Kniff, Johnny C's, as he's known. Honestly, you know, he's retired now. A great guy, just a fireman's fireman. His dad was a fireman out of Pennsylvania, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Great dude, a great tactician, a great commander when he took a battalion chief role. A great fireman, a heads up guy. Just did the little things right. And he did the little things right, and therefore he was able to translate that to the big things. Such a charismatic guy, and he was um, such a cool demeanor. Just would never get excited, never get too excited, and just really had the balance of what a great fire officer would be. And I owe a lot to John. I tried to model myself as much as I could when I became a battalion. How he did business, he had a lot of success, and one of his main things was he created relationships. There's very few people that Johnny C didn't get along with in the fire department. He was a relationship creator. He certainly should have ascended higher than where he ended up retiring at. A multitude of reasons for that, but just did such a great and masterful job of creating relationships. And that's that's something that I could have probably used that piece of advice 20 years ago to create relationships rather than to ruffle people's feathers in the New York way, because that's not really looked too kindly upon down in the South here. But I always appreciated that. Scotty Malcolm is a captain I worked for at 19 house back in the day. Just a gregarious, loud individual that was very, very opinionated, not afraid to send that email. He's the one I learned, hey, save the email you want to send till tomorrow. So he would always say, whatever email you got, come back next shift, and if you still want to send it, I'll support you. But you're not sending that today. So I think he learned that lesson the hard way. So he was trying to help me to not make the same mistake. But yeah, Willie Tanks, another one. Just, but and so many peers also that we influenced each other, and even younger guys. To think about being mentored by somebody that's younger than you or an up and coming person, just to see the way they, just exhibit just massive amounts of grit and toughness on the fire ground. And be like, damn, I need to step my game up. This guy's just, really, really tough. So I've taken more tips from guys that are equal rank or lesser rank than me. So I make no bones about saying, many of these guys, Dusty and Jimmy and Bobby Hark and Mike Pickety, some of the like tough dudes, like the dudes that you want at your house if your family's stuck, like they're going to get the job done. And so many more to the list, but that's a pretty good basis, I think, to explain a little bit. Notwithstanding of some of the guys I already mentioned that mentored me back on my dad's football camps, Fred Gallagher and Freddie Jr., God rest his soul. A lot of these guys that would talk to me and worked in some of the busiest firehouses in New York City, and they're talking to a guy and that works in Cobb County. And they're like, I remember Fred Senior said to me one day, I said, what do you do? Chief, you got guys on the fire ground. They really don't want to. They don't look like they want to get involved. They want to kind of. They're risk averse. They don't want to get involved. He said, good. He said, good for you. So that means you get to do that. So if they're not doing something, that gives you the opportunity to step up and do something. It's like, oh, okay, that's a good way to look at that. It was kind of the Jocko good back in 1999.
Hey,
Everyone else stinks on the fire ground. Good, you be better. So
yeah.
I always appreciated those guys, and so that's just something I had to mention. Yeah, funny story there.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah, and I know once again, I know it's difficult because we could probably all list off names for a long time. So if you didn't make the cut, just understand Kevin still loves you. But there would be a long list. So, but I do appreciate you listing out names. For me personally, it's important. Um, the next question is going to be if you were to give yourself advice as a rookie. So you have a rookie Kevin Lewis. He's fixing to walk into the fire station. He's fixing to walk into his first assignment. Right before he gets through the doors, you grab him by the shoulders, you look him in the eyes. What are you telling him?
Uh, Probably a couple of things. I mentioned one of them. Hey, be a relationship creator. Just try to create a positive relationship with everybody you encounter, um, and don't let your passion. You know um, maybe sometimes you can subdue your passion just a slight bit, because to some people that's a turnoff, and it's kind of weird to even say that, but people would always say, "Ah, he's really passionate," and that sometimes gets a negative connotation. I don't understand why. The passion to do a good job and uphold your oath is not a negative thing in the fire department. So I would say to myself, hey, continue to listen twice as much as you talk. That's pretty standard advice for firemen. And create relationships and look for the indirect approach. If you're looking to get the ball down the field, sometimes you may not want to just run it up the gut. You may want to, maybe you can bounce it to the outside and go, do an end around on this, and convince somebody that way. So I would say that I think it would be two of the ones that I would love to have heard back in 1996 when I took the job. And I probably may have, in some case, I could have gotten promoted maybe a few years earlier in each rank. So.
Yeah, no doubt. All right. So I'm going to, now that we've got the two questions knocked out, I'm going to open it up for anything that you want to say. It could be about search cadre or just general thoughts, and we'll end it there.
Yeah, well, thanks again for having me, Chris. I really appreciate it. It's been great fun talking with you a little bit, and it's nice to sit down. I get excited talking, like-minded people, so I really appreciate it. And I think in the fire service today, I know there's fire services have been arguing about, and in the firehouse, have been arguing about administration and command. And command won't let us do this, and the administration is shaky. We don't trust them. This, that, and the other thing. And that sentiment has been going on for a very long time in the fire department. So if people are suffering from, as I say, poor morale, the fire department's been suffering from poor morale, as they say, for freaking decades. But to be honest with you, the I think the morale in the firehouse in company is as strong as it ever has been, especially in Cobb County. And it's because they're doing the job. They're proud of the job they're doing, and they're upholding the oath in the best way they know how. And when you can look each other in the eye, you fellow brother firemen, and know that that last fire we just went on, we all we did a heck of a job, and yeah, there's room to improve on that, but you know we're proud to do this job, and the good firemen of this country have been the buoy that's been the life preserver of the fire service and the way things have gone. Um, the direction of the fire service, we've been pulled in half dozen different directions, EMS and hazmat, and everything's thing seems to be sucking away from the main thing, which is fire. And it's easy to be distracted, but I think the you know nationwide there's been kind of as Dusty says in his his old company there, reformation training that he had. There has been a reformation, and definitely a return to service for the citizens we serve. And you have to keep the main thing, and that's the oath you took, and the mission of saving lives and property. And we're here to save lives and property. And there was a moment in my career where it seemed like firefighters were putting themselves before the citizen. And well, if we get hurt, we can't help the citizen. Well, you know, the citizen doesn't want to hear the fireman's looking out for himself before you're looking after my 5-year-old son. Like, that's not going to fly. And civilians want to hear that the firefighters are prepared to take reasonable risk, um, not kamikaze suicide mission stuff, but like take reasonable amount of and sometimes significant risk to go in there and try to give somebody a chance. And I think that's kind of coming to bear, as I've seen over the last 15 or 20 years. Kind of got off track a little bit, maybe a little mission creep in the fire service, not just where I work, but in general. And I'm glad to see that. We're firemen. We're paid to take calculated risk and push the edge of that envelope in order to give people that chance to walk around and live again. So I just tip my cap and helmet to all the firemen out there that are looking to push the ball down the field and do the right thing for their fellow citizens. And I'm just really proud of that. And I'm proud of how far we've come with our search program. And I'm even more proud that people like you have sought out the information and have the desire to improve, and that we're so just eager to give it away. Because again, I can't stress this enough. We didn't invent these tactics. We just made it work for us. So just for everyone out there, just going to work every third day, or maybe you're working a 24/72. That's one right there for the ages. But just keep looking out for your fellow brothers and sisters in the company, and your civilians, and everything will be good. Especially when you're trying to push the ball down the field with search, because it is common sense, and our civilians, the citizens in our communities, expect us to come get them. And we're telling them to shut the door and hang out. And what you can't tell them is shut the door and hang out in your upper bedroom, but we're not coming to get you. Like, you can't say that anymore. You got to be ready to go to work and go help your people. So that's kind of my final thought on that. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. Kevin, if somebody wants to reach out to you, they want to maybe talk to you a little bit more, maybe they want to develop their own, maybe they heard something today and they're like, wait, I think this is the guy that can help to get us going. What would be the best way to reach you?
Sure. I think the best way to get in touch with me is probably the email, krlewis19@yahoo.com. I'm happy to send you everything I have. I think I got to get Dusty to send me the updated files, because he's updating things and putting things on there that because he's still so heavily plugged in. I'm since retired, so I'm not privy to a lot of that. But I can get the stuff, and if I need to get you in touch with Dusty, we could do that too. He's definitely he's a social media guy that I wasn't, and he helped our cadre out a tremendous amount with his social media stuff that was happening. And I never got to that level, so he's still, I think he's still in the game with that. So
I fuss
for
at
sure.
Dusty.
But yeah, if you need anything,
So I fuss at Dusty all the time
sorry,
because,
go ahead.
he was the guy that I heard on the scrap who said, "Hey, if look, once again, I didn't invent any of this stuff. If you want it, just reach out." And I remember tearing up the floors in my house because we had flooded for a bit, and I remember hearing that going, "Oh, he's full of it. Like, he's full of shit. He's not gonna give me all this stuff." So I reached out on Facebook. Sure enough, he's like, "Here's all the stuff." And as we developed, I didn't have a podcast at the time, but I give him crap because he was high on the list of people I wanted to come on. And he kept telling me I think he's the only person to ever tell me no. At the Dusty goes like, man, podcasts aren't really my thing. And I was like, God, you were killing me. Like, you're pretty important to my story. And then he knows Cobb. He's got this podcast going with Cobb now, where they kind of voluntold him to do some things, but potentially, I don't know the
Yeah,
situation, where he's kind of doing this little Cobb thing. I remember texting him immediately, going, "Hey man, I thought podcasts weren't your thing, and now you're hosting it." So finally, I got him
right,
around.
right.
I got him
Yeah,
around to say, he goes, "Look, if you want me to come on, last resort, I'll come on." So I like to give Dustin crap. I told him after he agreed to come on, I was said, Well, now I've won. The game was to get you to say yes. Now I'm not going to ask you anymore. I just wanted to get you on. So, back to the point.
Yeah,
Back, I squirrel brained right there. If they need you, they can reach out to you. Also, obviously, we have contact to Jimmy. So, if and Jimmy is more than happy to spread that stuff around. And also from me, you've got different of evolutions of what happens here. So Cobb has got their PowerPoint that's evolved 100 times. I've evolved it in my going down my path. But look, reach out to me. I'll give you all the same stuff. It's once again not a secret. We all want you to go and make it better. So I'm gonna stop rambling
definitely.
and say, Kevin, it was an absolute honor to have you come on, tell some of Cobb County's history, where the search program started, and get kind of some of your thoughts documented for the future. Um, Thank you for your time, sir.
Appreciate you very much. Have a great day, Chris.